kind of jumping off from the starting point of, how important it is to kind of seed things and to see how they grow. Just want to say, Jen, that was so inspirational, and it can take years, but it's one of those things where it does start to turn into the new way that things are and the new way things can be. Um, what I am here to talk about today is what we have been experiencing here in southern New Mexico in response to the migration that we've been having along our southern border. So just as a quick overview, I just kind of want to go through what I'm going to be going through today. We've had a sudden crisis emerge in the last few months, I think like a week after Molly came and visited. And then sort of what we noticed then as far as being able to help. I'm not necessarily alone. I had recently Iris over here, who's one of our new local burner community folks. And what we have learned in this process here, where, we've been having something that's happened inside of the boundaries of, our nation, and what it means to be able to start focusing on what is really, honestly, if you can count on people caring and wanting to help, being able to know that that's something that's out there and being able to help facilitate that as best possible. So I'm going to go through it. The first wave of response looked like, what we've done as far as networking, being able to recognize roles inside of this, what we've been able to do as far as logistics coordination, how to stabilize the emergency, and then what it means, I think, now to have a sort of continuation of care throughout any sort of crisis or any sort of time of great stress where things get really intense really quick. So beginning at the end of March, beginning of April 2019, Border Patrol began dropping off folks who'd been going through detention and processing off into our region's closest border town, Deming, New Mexico. Population about 14,000, and Border Patrol started dropping off folks on the order of about 180 a day. Within a month, we had a camp that had a population of over 4,500 people, and currently we've processed and helped folks get in touch with their families and resources, ordering over 6,500 from the last count. So when this started happening, Customs and Border Patrol, just their MO after detention facilities has been to just drop folks at the nearest bus station and have them just figure it out. Aside from, challenges that existed with language, just the sheer quantity, especially in such a rural location, was something that needed to be dealt with. So we first got word that this was happening because Border Patrol is not doing anything to notify people that this is the case. They're just dropping folks by a local homeless advocacy and just general community health organization, the Sherman Community Foundation. Definitely check them out online and on Facebook, as well as the local churches in the area. These are places then where just immediate baseline needs of food, water, and shelter are getting established. These were the ones that were the first askings for help then with it, just because of this quantity. It just is like, okay, I need help, I need an adult. So within the church organizations, it got notified then really quickly then through our local progressive churches, most notably the Unitarian Universalist Church, the Quakers, and that then became the first word within 12 hours of first drop-off that there needed to be some help that would get organized. And so we started having volunteers start arriving within the first 12 hours after the drop-off started happening, and they just kept ramping up. So starting to get that organized, we started to get a first wave of response. What we were lucky with is that the organizations that were providing housing and food assistance already had a good amount of logistics set up. Granted, it was at a scale that we were not ready for, but they had people that kind of knew what it was, and they were there to help because their hearts were in it. We were able to reach out very quickly to the city of Deming, and just as a pro tip, every city has public land available. They've got buildings and facilities and structures, National Guard armories across the board. It's really good to get acquainted with these resources ahead of time on both the municipal and county levels. Just to know what you have available to you, and you can start having that resource map. Immediately, folks were starting to get focused towards what was originally a World War II base and is now just the county's fairgrounds. This was a World War II base. This is where a number of Japanese internment camps were actually based out of. And luckily on the land there was a good series of concrete pads, plenty of open space that was relatively safe to drive on, and very large Quonset huts that were used to house military personnel a good 80 years ago. Um, so when we have both migrants and we have people who need help and people who need attention, as well as those that are ready to give attention, the most chaotic moments were happening in that first week and a half, really. At the quantities that folks were being dropped off at, there was a lot of people who wanted to help, but coordinating that help was something that was pretty overwhelmed in the logistics that was available through the local groups. So all of a sudden then people were starting to recognize sort of like what was most needed at that point. And, you know, I think on this one here, yep, the doctors and medical personnel were coming in, and there was a wave of donations from all the local thrift stores, charity organizations, and it was just a huge mess of materials as well as humans to start getting situated. Um, at this point, it started to be necessary to start organizing what the types of donations were and trying to figure out then, like, again, giving safe places for people to sleep, providing emergency medical care, and for folks who had prescription medicines, which were getting confiscated at the border, being able to help the doctors and help them start structuring their time, because everybody's ready to work 24-hour days, but no one can keep that up, you know. That then began where keeping lists, doing structured spreadsheets of just who lives where, how to get in touch with them, who's on call, always having backup, distances from the site. All of that became very, very useful for being able to make sure then that personnel could get organized and nobody was having to feel like they were dealing with it on its own. And just as a quick aside there, if anything like this is coming up, the first recognized needs was formula, very simple foods. We're not talking about just anything that Walmart wants to donate to the local homeless shelter. We just needed rice, beans, and oats, and ways of dispensing water, sanitized water, for being able to make sure that people were coming out, because as folks were coming in from the detention center, a lot of them were still going through dehydration and needed immediate medical care. So what we found was that fire and EMS personnel were the first ones to really kind of get it as far as organizing care. This is going to be one of those things I didn't mention in the slide here, but if anybody has any time starting to work on your FEMA ICS 100, 200, and 300, it's a sort of incident command structure where even if the federal government's not going to arrive, it gets folks used to kind of communication. Qualified medical staff in this first one here, and what I call GSD language, but getting shit done language, where it's not personal, you know, this thing just needs to happen right now. And just understanding that, you know, if you can or cannot provide it, it's just this is the next thing that needs to happen. Being able to have that open communication and have people be ready for that, you know, even if you don't have the immediate supplies available there, you know, just quick yeses and nos and being able to move through immediate care. EMS and fire folks were able to understand it. In our situation, law enforcement in those first days was a little shaky with it, just because we have a pretty significant border patrol population out here, and the politics of what the response looked like kind of muddied the water. Thankfully, with getting fire and EMS being on site from the get-go, it started to create some pretty compassionate conversations with city and county personnel, where it didn't turn into a really quick us and them, or just like this is a political issue. You know, making sure it stayed focused on what each person and each family's needs were was the big conversation that allowed this to move through productively. The Sherman Community Foundation already was founded by a lawyer in the area. And so making sure then that things were moving on the up and up, that lawyer was pretty well networked in with the city and county governments. You'll usually find some pretty decent folks in the legal profession. Make sure you've got who those folks are. We were fortunate, like I said, to have that ahead of time. So that became something then that allowed to cross all of the different bridges and even secure funding then for the project from the city as it was just starting to get recognized as a humanitarian need. From the immediate response and with it, the legal group as well as regional groups that were also dealing with an influx, both in El Paso and Tucson, were notified of the situation. And, you know, in a city of 14,000 people, or a small town of 14,000, there are just certain resources that are not as readily available. So if it's going to require greater transportation than what's available, or greater legal aid, or a greater number of people, then reaching out to regional population centers was one of the first big alleviation things. And as soon as the groups that were responding started to see themselves as a part of a greater mesh network, then things started to change in a really good, positive, productive way. Want to say then, going back to the donations kind of stuff, that people feel it when you care. And if people are doing it just out of a sense of compassion, then um, everybody wants to help really, really badly. So make sure then that if they are going to help, you can focus that through the exact resources that are needed. Folks were good. You can trust that folks are going to figure out the carpool if they want to show up to do the volunteering thing. But then when those cars are coming, make sure then that it's understood then through whatever local community group and whatever church groups and their leaders are available of what the resources are that are specifically needed. We received so many clothes that it was just people had to climb over them when there was much more base needs stuff that needed to get organized. So do not be scared to say no to donations. Do not be scared to focus that in an effort that's going to be more productive, because everything you take in that you can't use immediately, you're gonna need to crawl through that later or dispose of it later, and that's just time and resources that could be better spent on people and actually administering direct aid. Making sure that in this period there that like somebody is collecting names and phone numbers, somebody is making sure then that they're keeping lists going, and that there are people that are coordinating those lists of volunteers is a really good stretch at this point to prevent folks from having to overstay and burn out on the work that was coming up. We saw that with our medical personnel within the first week pretty readily, where it just didn't feel like there was anybody on top of it, and it's hard to be the one to also administer care and then organize the administration of that care, providing the types of tools necessary where if you're a younger folk, if you're kind of digitally connected as most of the burner folks are, that hey, we can have collaborative documents. Hey, this is then going to go to every single person. Not everybody can edit this, but some people can just view it there, and then making that information on like every single clipboard going around right there. That way then you have people able to be feeling empowered to call out for help when they need it, so that it's not going to be so bad. I'm going to say in this situation specifically, because we were providing aid about 40 minutes, we're even further up in the mountains than Deming is off the highway, that being able to get the distances and just how quickly somebody would be available and how readily they are, like ranking people on a scale of 1 to 10 as far as how quick or how much time they've got available to be able to helped out immensely for organizing a database for support. In the roles that people take on in this situation, a lot of people are going to self-select, and it works out pretty dang okay. Don't get me wrong. There's going to be folks that come in that are super adrenaline rushed on it, and they're going to want to be able to help, and they think they have to do everything. One of my favorite sayings for it, and just reading people in, is that calm is fast. So just be able to move at a calm pace. When you need to do any kind of work there, help people get in touch with who the leaders are that are going to emerge inside of the groups then. And then, just make sure you're checking in with each other. That getting shit done language thing is super real as far as being able to be like, hey, do you need this? No, it's okay. But make sure then that you're seeing when the last time somebody was able to eat some food was, and you have volunteers ready if they are standing around to be able to help relieve in that role. Checklists are super great, and just keep moving with it. And then in the actual physical place of organization, make specific spaces originally to just deal with baseline care, distribution of different sets of resources. Maslow's hierarchy of needs is not absolutely essential in this because it's not totally true, but seriously, food place, water place, bedding, shelter, clothing, and medical spaces are 4 different places there. They should be somewhat interlinked, but make enough room for people to be able to move in the back end of it, and then for folks on the front end to see that it is somewhat organized. And then when it comes to those spaces, storage and processing of materials, put like things with like things, and don't treat materials the same way you treat people. Facilitate the people's having their one-on-one interactions, especially one-on-one for families. Make sure then, hey, we've all got great designs for shade. It's super necessary down here in the Southwest. I love the BlackRock hardware stuff and helping build out EMT shelters where people could just have a safe place before they get a bed. Having safe places to play outside, for places for kids to take a break is really, really good. Food refrigeration, you'll find that there's a lot of excess capacity with a bunch of the different food banks and food distribution centers. Getting refrigerated trucks out started to help out pretty well. But as I mentioned before, the biggest stuff is going to be making sure that formula is safe to drink, and then just being able to have sanitized water for super simple foods, because most folks, when they've been traveling, are not able to take on very complex things. Sanitation is really good, helping build out little regional pockets to wash, clean water into dirty water, and then having some sort of process for being able to process the dirty water out into the world so it doesn't turn into a mud pit's been great. And then for the doctors and organizing medical supplies, they know how they like to have things organized, coordinate, and just get a couple minutes with them to just be like, hey, we just received in a whole bunch of Pedialyte or IV fluids kind of stuff there. What's going to be your preferred place to do it? And do you feel like you can communicate that to the next doctor coming on shift, keeping them in the loop and not just being like, oh, the medical supplies are in this big pile over here, figure it out, is less time that's care than with the individuals. So when it comes to then organizing donations, like I said, if you can try to stop them ahead of time, great. Otherwise, as people are leaving, ask them to take their clothes or whatever other things that are unnecessary, because there's just going to be a surplus out. So, nice pack in, pack out, leave it better than how you found it thing, and include that kind of leave no trace ethos when you've got volunteer staff and kind of get them acquainted with that ahead of time. What we found that was amazingly good was how responsive construction contractors were. I was fortunate enough to be able to start a makerspace up, and having a good conversation with Breedlove about being able to have it be a center for community resiliency paid off in spades. We had a Quonset hut built out, and you'll see some of the windows on the left there that we were able to facilitate as far as getting them repaired. Most of the structures and spaces that are going to be publicly available, well, they're publicly available because they haven't been taken care of very well. These are things that are going to need a little bit of love. So if you have people coming in that have got trade skills, try to keep and ask your volunteers to keep an active list of things that are going to be really useful if you could get somebody in on it. Just because, this person wants to come in and help distribute beds and stuff, if they know how to do woodworking, if they know how to cut glass, if they know how to be able to install HVAC or do any kind of like electrical hookup kind of stuff, keep them on standby, get their information, and be able to have them be able to build things out in their workspaces. We built a lot of the renovations that happen in these spaces about 45 minutes out of town, but we were able to make sure then that there'd be contractors on site with every type of logistical need for scissor lifts, crane trucks, skid loaders for moving earth, really well because of this. And that was something then that was ultimately, like, again, one of those like senses, like, it's getting better, and being able to keep up that conversation of it gets better is one of those things that's super helpful for everybody's morale and to help prevent folks from burning out. This is just a photo of some of the shade structure stuff that we built out. You'll notice the mud pit things are coming up, but just in general, being able to distribute like clean water and places to wash clothing and to be able to make sure folks can process cloth diapers is super important. You should make sure then that if you can get everything labeled out ahead of time, or just be able to use like iconographic language, that started to get really helpful when we had laminating machines and printers start showing up, which was great. Okay, cool. I think I covered everything on this slide here. Oh, and I like this one here. We were able to get a good photo of the volunteers. Doxy's Detroit Backpack Project, where processing and creating useful travel supplies for folks that were in homeless communities. We started instituting that program through our local homeless shelters a few years ago. So folks were already in on it. If you want to see some really good lists of just really useful things, everything from space blankets, you'll notice in this situation, most of the families that we were helping were women and children. Having games and toys for kids is really good to also pack in and consider. Coloring books and crayons go so far. And, little collapsible soccer balls, great, great, great things. But just, basic toiletries. We were able to start networking and getting in touch with organizations that were amenable to facilitating travel. A lot of the folks that have been coming in have families already here. So making pack outs so that they can travel safely. And if there is something that comes out in the pack out, they're going to be okay still anyways. Nobody's going to be left alone. And that sort of like giant embrace of care, where actually a lot of people across the country cared about this. And so through the already existing organizations, no one's going to be stranded, and you have to trust it, and you have to encourage that trust in it, because it actually generally works out. Be prepared for the worst and hope for the best, and make sure you're led by your hope. It's good. After we kind of dealt with like stabilization, and we were able to start having all the clipboards, all of the logistics processing, things were in spaces, and there was a general order. Folks that needed the help there were happy to share information around with one another, and just making sure then that we could continue the care then became a lot of it, because you're going to have people just finding out about problems and just coming in, and they're all going to be really scared. But after that first wave right there, the biggest thing is to just kind of keep things at a nice stable level. Let folks know that there is an order that has emerged. It will happen naturally. And I do want to emphasize just how naturally like emergent structuring of help happens, where people can tell when they're helping and when they're not helping. And the fire EMS and doctor people, you know, it's like, hey, that's not helping. Can you do this? People will start to learn what those different patterns are. What you want to try to make sure of in this period here is that this is going to be then where you can avoid the burnout the most with the lists that have been getting kept of volunteers there. You can start getting people in on schedules. And that's going to be something then that's going to help the continuation of care. From the first 8 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks of just, you know, a lot of humans needing help coming in, it started to get national media attention. And the theory that was going was that it was like a manufactured crisis. We're a traditionally democratic portion of the state here. And so if we can start scaring the population, if Border Patrol can start scaring the population, it might start shifting who we're voting for. I can go into politics on things in a while, but just in general, there started to be a lot more that the Border Patrol was doing to stop creating this crisis. And at that point, then the community organizations that were already local started to integrate a lot of what they'd learned from the care structure into the rest of the work that they did. And it started to become a much better growth or communal effort kind of thing. My favorite phrasings for it is like, you know, if you need to go fast in the project, go alone. But if you want to go far, you go together. And any assurances that can be built up in between different organizations to encourage them to recognize that they're not having to do this on their own. They're not the sole ones that are responsible for everything that's going on around them. And then if people are feeling, you know, in a way that this needs to be dealt with or this thing needs to happen, look around, take a see on who else is caring about this. We were able to get a lot of great support from El Paso and Tucson on these projects, as well as bus lines that have been running out of Albuquerque through the Mexicano transportation network to start getting folks moving along. So it didn't have to feel like it was too much of an onus. And one of my major things is just, you know, it might not be able to happen now, but we're going to deal with this and we're going to check back in with each other in a set period of time, and we're just going to keep taking small steps forward. And that's the major thing to recognize in any of these crises that come up, is it's just a bunch of small steps. And eventually, like, those really awesome, gracious, really lucky moments start to emerge then, where it's like, oh my goodness, we were so scared about formula for so while right there. But then all of a sudden, then, you know, a big group buy happened. It's like, okay, we don't have to worry about this problem anymore. What's the next big thing? And just doing those little steps was really powerful for continuing it, so no one got too overwhelmed then. So kind of finishing off from that there, in the continuation of care that has been since then, we were lucky to have the right media signaling from the get-go. It's really difficult for people to see folks suffering, no matter what their politics are, and do nothing about it. You know, all the rationalizations kind of fall apart when, you know, you just see a child crying. So that kind of thing was really powerful. We were able to start having celebrities come in on the project at the beginning of June. And all of the major national childcare organizations were able to see what it was looking like there. And, you know, newspapers on your side, having somebody there who's got good verbosity to describe it, and was really, really important for being able to really bring the alleviation off. One of the hidden secrets I feel like of the world is that we're actually in a time of great abundance. We have way more than we need actually to take care of everybody. It's just then making sure then that folks can see that and they start recognizing, oh, I should start pushing resources this way, or I should start doing this. From there, the organizations have all grown that were a part of it. I would actually say that Southern New Mexico is going to be wildly beneficial as far as what is typically rural poverty-wise, one of the poorest states in the union, that everybody's on a way better tip from this kind of thing. And this is one of those things I want to make sure I can share with people day in, day out. These experiences change people. And as long as they're not having to deal with it alone, everybody's been growing in amazingly good ways as far as what we're going to do then as this may expand or contract, but then how we can continue it going, where we're going to take care of our people better. We recognize some much better like quality of life things, and everybody deserves shelter, everybody deserves clean food and water, and the organizations feel greatly empowered, especially since they were able to get national recognition from it. So that kind of little thing there, just keep that in your back pocket as you're having to do the hard stuff day in, day out. And then the biggest thing that we've been having, as I'm also an organizer in politics in our area, is recognize who the great new leaders are, like folks who've never had an opportunity before. Take the time to encourage them to participate in new leadership programs. We still live in a great democracy. We can help each other out and recognize then that these folks then could potentially be the leaders that could come up next. And when this happens again, we'll be even better off than for it there. These are my biggest kind of takeaways that I want to have from what we've had to deal with. And I think, yeah, that should be it. Let me see here. Yeah. Let me see here. Doot, doot. All right. Hey.
Wow. That was amazing. I'm just like reflecting on what you just said.
That was amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
What a download. And now that we don't have a screen shared anymore, if y'all want to click into gallery view, then it'll give you the opportunity to see everybody who's on the call.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. Wow. Jen and Nick, thank you guys so much for sharing with us today.
Thank you. This
Wow.
is just, I know, that is really overwhelming. Hi, I'm back. Gallery view.
Hey,
Go ahead.
so I was going to say, Nikipedia, I don't know if you're on here, but one of the things I was thinking of from what Nick just shared is, do you remember that document that Desiree shared with us from the Field Innovation Team on organizing relief setups? Do you remember what that document was called by chance? Was it called like Shelter Smart or something?
Yeah, Shelter Smart. That's exactly what it was. If you'd like, I have a copy of that somewhere around. I could forward that off.
Yeah, I just want to, Nick, I love everything you were talking about. And I feel like there's a guide that this Field Innovation Team put together that maybe showcases some of the things you guys have been doing in a visual format that may help what you're thinking about. And also just, I love what you're doing, and I think that's a great resource to share. So
I've got two books that I want to bring up right now that actually Dara shared with me back at the Nation of Makers conference that reading them at a time were super duper great. One of them is Managing Humanitarian Relief. It's in a second edition right now from Eric James. It goes through really just like every type of bit of logistics, how to think about populations, and really was like a really good guidepost ahead of time there. You can probably pirate this at libgen.io if you're into that or you don't have access to the publishing world that way. And the Managing Humanitarian Innovation kind of follow-up book there. Whenever there's a major crisis, kind of borrowing off of shock doctrine stuff, it's a wonderful time to actually implement new systems and to ask people like, hey, we can do this to do it differently this time and try to implement new ways of doing things that are going to do better by all of us. If anybody has any questions, Jen, I just wanted to say right there, I'm interested as a question for you as far as like introducing arts program. We had folks that were doing it in Puerto Rico there. That tie into the charter school network, like did people just hear about ahead of time in the public school system about the work you were doing and just kind of hearing about it from like after school stuff?
Yeah, I have a lot of teacher friends in and around Denver and kind of all over the world. And so, almost everything I've ever done has been word of mouth, and they just got word of it, and I was asked to do an interview.
Nice.
And then they hired me on the spot. Apparently for Charter School Teacher Network, they never hire anyone out of their interview. So this was like a thing, and then there were some phone calls made, and where I live out here by the airport, there's 7 schools, and you can go through when you're hired and for the Charter School Teacher Network, you can go through and just say, I only want to go to these schools. So I can walk, and there's jobs every single day. And it's a set amount. And now I actually wanted to mention to you, Nick, that I'm in charge of helping a lot of the immigrant students, and I just call them expats, like I'm called in Nicaragua, the students that are just moving here, and helping them get set up with, programming, dance classes, theater classes, sports, connecting them around the communities. But I'm also being hired to sort of manage the middle schools, files, and they just need one person to come in twice a week that can just help archive and manage. I'm a very organized person. I know how, like, all the things you're talking about, I can come and sort jeans for you.
Yeah.
and bleach and soaps and all of those things, and fold blankets and wash blankets. But that's kind of what I'm hired to do around here, is provide support to the schools. In addition to teaching, they have plenty of teachers, but they don't have anybody who's going to come and find all of the cords that go to the walkie-talkies.
Yep.
So that's been an interesting thing. And being bilingual has been super helpful. Now I'm bilingual. I'm a native English speaker, and I'm bilingual now. And so that was another thing I forgot to mention in my speech, was that, or in my presentation, was how many doors have opened for me now that I am bilingual.
That's awesome. I'm super inspired because we saw some very similar kind of like tie-ins as the schools and groups started to kind of come together, because they saw the value of what was being done and how important it was. And there's no reason why this has to be a suffering game. It's awesome, actually, and much better when you've got the art and you've got the creativity involved in it there. And
I agree.
Yeah.
And marketing is expensive, and I mean, it just seems ridiculous when we're just trying to help people. If people need a teacher, or if I see that somebody needs support, then I'll go and let them know that I'm available.
All the time.
Yeah, all the time.
I know the marketing thing gets really like out of hand, or it feels like it has to be marketed, but having concerted media messages, we had some pretty strict stuff come up where it's like we couldn't, photographing what was happening around us was not a part of the situation, both for like security reasons, and then also just like, people can sometimes take it as like, oh, you're going to sell helping people, but
right.
kind of keeping everything actually pretty muted was very, very useful, and just kind of letting the work speak for itself. And
exactly.
It's really good.
I would just pose a question to the group, and if anyone wants to unmute and ask the question, do that too. But I'm curious. So we've been trying to figure out what these BWB worldwide calls are about. And so this is the second one we've done. And, Molly and I were talking about, what we're doing, different projects across the network that might be able to come in and tell us what they're up to and share their learnings. And you can do it now, you can do it later. We'd love to know if this is the useful thing to do with this time. I think the other one, we tried to have kind of a community conversation amongst people on Zoom, and that was a little bit messy. And so I don't know, we also want to just make sure that you all know this is your time in a way. And I think that the most important thing from Molly and I's perspective is that the stories of what people are doing are getting out there to the network, and that we're allowing more people to meet each other, so that person-to-person connection can just happen. So I don't know. I'm always going to probably ask that question: is are we doing it?
I don't know what I would have done without you guys the last 3 years. I'm so grateful. One of the ways that I need support is I need more teachers down there all the time, because I do have a home in Denver. I have a cat. I have family, so I can't leave all year, every year, and we have to come back and make money. I don't have income when I'm down there. I could be teaching online English classes, but I'm teaching, I did all the numbers today for how many classes. I didn't give you guys the 2019 numbers, But I mean, I'm super overwhelmed when I'm down there by myself. I think I taught 81 classes and 6 privates in something like 8 or 9 weeks by myself, walking around, and getting on a bus. I have no car. You know, we don't even have a floor in our house there, no running water, you know. And so having some more support where I can be there and be sort of supervising the building, but then having maybe some younger students or interns or volunteers going to the sites and actually teaching the kids would help me a lot. And having volunteers there year round, or making enough money that we're able to pay teachers to be there. That's kind of the support that I'm looking for in the future. I just want the school to grow. All of us, even the parents and students down there, just want it to grow. They don't want me to leave. They're trying to get me to do video classes now, and none of them have tablets. So they're all sitting. There's like 12 kids sitting around a laptop that some tourist left on a bus. So they're just, Profesora, we have a computer. How'd you get it? We don't want to tell you. So, you know, maybe getting some iPads down there for not iPads, but little tablets for the kids. Things like that would help me, you know, just kind of getting more attention for what we're doing.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I think that we could spend hours talking about the conversation of how to enroll more volunteers and like turn it into a year-round thing. And that's definitely a conversation we'd love to have with you.
Yeah.
For me, these conversations like on a monthly basis, kind of going back to the whole like believing in that network of care and support has done wonders for being able to kind of keep the strength up and not ever have to feel too alone in any of the work that comes in, day out. Being able to see all the different comments that come up when the videos get posted, and just know then that actually none of us are alone with what we're having to do, is something that has been invaluable on the morale and avoiding burnout kind of side of stuff there. And literally just being able to hear that other people are working on amazing projects that they're really passionate about and are doing really good communal work is something then that in face of everything that's kind of hopeless and dejecting about our times right now, it gives me a lot of strength and always has. So these conversations have been ace. Keep it up. Keep doing it.
There's hard days though. There's some days where I'm like, ooh, that
Mama
first
said there'd
year
be days like this.
when there's no butter in the community.
Mm.
Oh my God. No, that was serious the first year. I got used to
Sounds
it.
good.
But, there's days when there's no eggs or there's no beans, and I can't afford to. I'm not eating steak on an island in the middle of Nicaragua. I'm not doing that. I'm not eating red meat. I'm barely eating any chicken, so we're mostly vegetarian when we're down there, but there's hard days, and there's so many mosquitoes, and you don't want to, you have horses and you have animals and plants and you don't want to spray anything. There's no screens, there's no fans, there's no electricity to run the fan. And Molly and I were talking the other day, for anybody who comes down and volunteers for us, I'll just say, oh, you're going to be teaching art classes and dance classes. Doesn't that sound fun? Yeah. And then it rains for the 20 weeks that the kids are there, and then there's no electricity, or the toilets aren't flushing or whatever's happening. It's hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nick, your catchphrase "calm is fast" really blew my mind. I wrote it down.
It's crazy.
Thank you. That's very sweet to say. I appreciate you all immensely.
If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Is that you?
No, I don't know where that one comes from. It's like one of those just sayings that came in one point. And
that's some Burning Man jive right there, man.
My name is Nick Prince, Nick, Prince. You can find me on Facebook pretty readily. I can be reached on Signal at 773-930-7754. Also just personal cell phone number. The major organizers and groups that we were able to help facilitate: Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Silver City, the Sherman Community Foundation in Deming, New Mexico, Annunciation House out of El Paso, and No Mas Muertes out of Tucson. And as far as keeping up with it, we get news stories published pretty readily, but Sherman Community Foundation page has the most direct communications. Then City of Deming has also taken it up, and they've got good donations as well as information available on the City of Deming's municipal webpage. Most of the support and work was been able to be facilitated through a makerspace I founded here in Silver City called the Future Forge. And if anybody is ever having to do that long stretch on I-10, feel free to come on by, check it out, and super happy to get you plugged in on local and regional projects going on around our state here. Thank you.